with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neal Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neal Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, a very, very important show today. A lot of developments. They're all important, but every week, it's just things are moving so quickly. But I was happy to see that President Trump and President Xi from China looks like they're getting close to making a deal, which is going to roll back some of the tariffs. Hopefully, we'll get to intellectual property and forced technology transfers, and we'll start to address some of the fundamental issues. They're calling it a phase one deal. It's not the ultimate deal. Apparently, there's going to be a lot of agricultural products purchased in this phase one agreement.
Which we have to look at and see when they do them. Could be up to 5 years, 10 years. We don't know yet.
And, I think President Trump is a very good negotiator. And when he came with these tariffs for December 15th, the next 15%, which would be essentially all consumer goods, and where the American consumer is going to feel that as a manufacturer of consumer goods. I got to tell you, a lot of components as well as finished goods come from China, and it will be passed on. Make no mistake. And it is not China paying for those tariffs. It is the American companies who import those products that are paying for those tariffs. But I think he put that out there as like a chip, okay, to say, okay, I'm just going to put it out there so I can, okay, we're not going to go forward with that, to give him something to negotiate and bargain with the Chinese.
Well, yeah, I mean,
knowing that that was going to be painful and he probably wasn't going to do it, but let's just put it out there anyway.
And some of the times I think he puts things out there and he looks for the response. Even in our own media, he looks for the response and he lets them run with it, Neal. He lets them run with it and then he backtracks them and does what he wants to do. Yeah, I think he put it out there as a leverage chip.
Yeah, very fascinating. Hey, the markets like what they're hearing right now.
They're loving it right now.
The European markets are liking what they're hearing right now. So let's hope that, the economy is going to continue into 2020 very strong, creating a lot of wealth for the average everyday American. Anybody who's got a 401k, anyone who's got a pension. So many of us are depending on the market and what type of a retirement we're going to have, what type of life we're going to have. So many Americans are invested in the market, whether they know it or not. This is a very, very important indicator to our prosperity. Another thing happened this week, Rich, is President Trump announced that the United States is exiting from the Paris Climate Treaty.
He formally announced that.
Yeah. I guess there was no surprise.
Filed the letter.
And he's gone according to the sort of treaty. It says on this amount of days you can do this, and then you got to wait so long, and then you can do that. So I guess he's formally said, okay, we're getting out, but we don't actually get out of the agreement until November 4th, 2020.
That's right.
Imagine that on Election Day.
That's right.
Next
year.
What a coincidence. Next year.
Exactly. Yep.
I wonder how much that's going to have to do with the election and the campaigning. Well, we're going to talk right now to Pat Michaels, a very, very good friend of our show from the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and he has just written on this topic. He is the expert, and we're very happy to have him with us today. Pat, welcome to Made in America.
Great to be with you guys this afternoon.
So tell us what happened this week with President Trump. I mean, there's no surprise, right? I mean, were you expecting this? I think you would have been expecting this.
Yeah, President Trump announced a few months into his administration in the Rose Garden that he was going to put the mechanisms in place to exit the Paris Climate Agreement. And one of those the actual exit entails a letter from the president to the agreement administration saying we are withdrawing, and it takes 1 year one calendar year for that withdrawal to be effective. And yes, that will happen on November 4th next year, right on election time. But he did what he said he was going to do. And he wrote the letter the first day that it was possible for it to be written. So he really has lived up to his campaign promise on the Paris Agreement.
Well, yeah, and I would think a lot of people, I would think we're so split. Half the country is going to say, that's terrific. We're going to save all those jobs, 400,000 jobs, billions of dollars that we're not going to have in the economy. We're going to be a debacle. And the other half's going to say, great going. Great going.
Well, yeah, I mean,
what's going to happen?
Well, first of all, the Paris Agreement was climatically meaningless.
That's right.
It did not have an enforcement mechanism. The Chinese, who are the world's largest emitter, I was just looking at some data yesterday, it's not going to be more than a couple of years before they will now emit twice as much per year as we do. The Chinese agreed literally to do nothing. They said that they would attempt to stabilize their emissions around the year 2030. And energy economists have known for years that as the Chinese economy matures, emissions were going to level off somewhere around 2030. So they didn't agree to do a darn thing. The countries that did agree to do a lot of stuff were the United States and the Europeans. And the stuff that we were going to do was going to cost money. Trump said, no, this is not a good idea. Why should we unfairly advantage the Chinese? And the Indian nation got away with an even better deal. They got to become marginally less efficient with time than they were becoming. In other words, put less of an effort into reducing emissions per capita than they are now. Does that sound like climate? Yeah, it was a raw deal, and I am glad to have been in the community of people that were making this public, and I think our efforts have been rewarded.
And in Pat, in your press release, you said that China, the agreement, that the accord as written, now we're pulling out of it, would guarantee that China will produce the lion's share of carbon dioxide emissions for the foreseeable future. You're saying nearly double of what that is of the United States. And it also, notice you said, it should also be well noted that since 2005, a long time ago, nearly 15 years ago, U.S. carbon dioxide emissions have dropped more than those from any other large industrialized nation.
That's right. We have taken the lion's share and worked on it.
So isn't that amazing? And yet, the progressives and in this Democrat side of the presidential debates, nobody is bringing that up. That China is producing the lion's share of carbon dioxide, and nothing really happens to them. They get away with impunity of what they're doing. And the U.S., on the other hand, is the industrialized nation that is doing the most.
And the reason
this just doesn't come through.
Yeah, and the reason we did the most is because we substitute natural gas for coal in electrical generation, and that's going to continue, of course, unless Elizabeth Warren becomes president. She has promised to stop fracking of natural gas, so I guess that will put us back, into the energy stone age. No,
but can she do that? Right, Pat, can she make a decision unilaterally to say, "Hey, we're not going to do
as an executive
anymore"?
Order?
Can she do that?
She could do it on federal land, and it would probably be challenged in the courts. That's for sure. I don't think she can do it on private land. But hey, she wants Medicare for all, and she doesn't know how to pay for it, or the bill is so high that it's unsustainable. In reality, does not seem to stop this woman.
Let me ask you a question. So if, in fact, you have this accord that Obama's folks signed on to, and if, in fact, that the two largest polluters in the world really have no effect as a result of this accord, and hence nothing happens with them, yet we pay the lion's share, again, hate to be redundant, of losing jobs, losing income, changing our economy, and all this other stuff that's happening. None of the other well-industrialized nations are chipping in on that. Then, for the bottom line, for the average American, what's the point?
Exactly. And the other part of this issue was that we agreed to be the largest contributor to a $100 billion a year slush fund to go to third world kleptocracies for so-called renewable energy. I wonder if you know how well that was going to work out. You know what? And President Trump thought that wasn't a good deal either.
So, President Trump, is this a good issue to run on next year?
If he explains it, I think, as clearly as the numbers show it, and as clearly as he did in the Rose Garden in 2017 when he announced that he was going to withdraw, yeah, I think he can sell it.
I don't. Pat, can you stay with us? We got to take a really quick break here. This kind of segments right well into that. We're going to take a quick break, but stick with us. There's more with Pat Michaels from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and a very good friend of ours, Pat Michaels from the Competitive Enterprise, is joining us right now. We just talked about the Paris Climate Accord. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about the Green New Deal, because that's really picking up a lot of steam, Rich. And I think everybody's signed on to it, at least all the major candidates, except for Biden. And Biden is, kind of being nudged along anyway. So, in another month, he will also embrace it, as he's given up every other position that he once held in order to satisfy the radical left of the Democrat Party. But, Pat, tell us a little bit about the Green New Deal. I mean, we're talking about trillions and trillions on top of Medicare for all, which I think now I've just seen something at $54 trillion.
$52 trillion for that. $92 trillion or $91 trillion for the Green New Deal.
So tell us, Pat, tell us about that. How ridiculous is that?
Well, it says, we'll drop our carbon dioxide emissions by 50%, maybe about 15 years from now or something like that, and then 100% not much longer after that. That would mean we'd have no fossil fuel use. And I just would like to draw to the Democrats' attention that they lost the election of 2016 in the Marcellus Shale. That would be along the Ohio River Valley in southwestern Pennsylvania and Ohio, where there was the biggest switch of voters from Obama to Trump. That was because of those energy policies. And if they push this Green New Deal, they are going to get routed in those areas. Those voters are never going to come back.
Well, you know what I find interesting, and this is what I think is the important point, and this is the true story. If you have $100 billion, follow the money for Medicare for all, all these trillions of dollars that are out there. If you, in fact, have, the Jane Fonda thing saying, oh, my God, 11 years from now, we're going to have trillions of dollars. We have to spend it. We have to save the world. The point of the matter is follow the money. This is such a typical Democrat money grab. That you have to believe that it's the true story is who controls the money, and that's the power, and that's the scary part of this whole thing. God, this is perfect for the Clinton Foundation. I mean, this is perfect. They don't even have to invent the wheel. It's sitting there. Just plug it right in, get that money in there, and I'm sure we're going to save democracy.
Yeah, but when you're talking about amounts of money like this, because they really don't exist, what you're talking about is inflating the currency. And I assure you that if we had the inflation that type of spending would require, whoever was sitting in the Oval Office and did it would not be there in the next election.
So we're hearing very loud, voices within the Democrat Party, some SOS voices going out right now. We're not going to get elected. We're not going to. They think that they have a very good cycle coming up, but because of the policies of the far left, that they just can't get elected. And I think that even the Democrats themselves are sensing that Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, and all of these are just pipe dreams. But worse than that America will never vote for them. So why do it? I mean, they're just walking off the cliff. Just like the Japanese on Saipan Island in World War II, they're walking off the cliff.
Right.
They know they're walking to their deaths. Why are they doing this?
Political parties, particularly the Democrats, have a way of doing that. Everybody told them in 1972 George McGovern wasn't going to win more than one or two states, and yet he was nominated, wasn't he? Everybody knew that. And everybody knows that if they allow the radical left to continue to have ascendancy in the party, that they're going to have a big problem next year. And I don't think they can stop it, just like it couldn't stop McGovern.
Well, you're right. You know, if in fact President Trump does get out there, and he's got to continue these rallies, I think they're very important. They also are a great physical manifestation of the support he has, and people can see it. I think there's value in that, so he needs to do that. But when you look at all the numbers and all the promises, none of it can seem real. None of it can. How could you have $92 trillion for this? $54 trillion for that. $20 trillion for something else. Then they're going to take on all the debt for students. That's trillions of dollars. And before you know it, I think Bernie's coming out with a program, Yogurt for All. He feels everyone should have yogurt. It's not fair that only people in the upper middle class and higher can have yogurt. And that's a couple of $1 trillion, I think. So when you look at all the silliness of this and the president explains it, no one's going to believe that.
Right. I happen to agree with you. I think we could call it inflation for all and taxes for everybody.
I think that's it. There you go. I got to tell you, I agree with you, Pat, because why not? Let's come up with everything. Let's give everything away. I think there should be rugs for everybody, as a matter of fact. That's fine with me. Let's do that. We thought he was going to give puppies to everyone. But the point of the matter is, at some point it becomes so supercilious that none of it's real, none of it's taken seriously by anybody out there. And I think if the president can get out there and explain all of that, he's going to win. He's going to win big.
Hey, Pat, you've been a wonderful guest. I know you're in a tight time frame. It's great to have you with us. Pat Michaels from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Always a pleasure, Pat.
Yeah, let's do it again real soon, okay?
Would love to. Coming up, we have Jason Pye, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for FreedomWorks. A lot to talk about. You don't want to miss it. Stick with us.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, we were just talking about Medicare for All and what it would do to our taxes. Now, Elizabeth Warren has always said, well, I got a plan for that. Well, I got a plan for that. And I got a plan for that, too. But she's very, very light on the details, at least until recently, but still light on how she's going to pay for all of this. And now that we're starting to see the price tag, like you said, 90 trillion here, 50 trillion there, 20 trillion, over there. I mean, this is getting really, really scary.
Well, I got to tell you, what she did, I think, was the worst thing she could do for the Democrats, because she put her
ran
card
for
out
office.
There. Well, aside from that, and insulting Native Americans for generations, but aside from that, no, seriously, she put it out there right now. It's out there that 2 million jobs will get lost. in this whole game.
And the healthcare side.
On the healthcare side, right. And by the way, she said a solution could be that they can sell life insurance. I mean, it's close. Insurance, health insurance, at least it's just one word that changes.
Well, another way to look at that is that they would lose two million jobs in the very productive private economy.
Right.
And they would replace them with 4 million jobs in the very unproductive economy, the government bureaucracy.
Right. The people that you love to go to when you have to get a new driver's license. Those are wonderful people. You have a problem, they throw you out. But worse than that, Neal, she admitted that 178 million Americans are going to, they're going to lose their private health insurance. Well, I don't want to say anything, pal, but that's half the country.
That's more than half the country.
So that's not a good thing to have out there, and she cannot take it back. She can tap dance it all she wants, but Richard Gere did better than her, and that was in the movie Chicago. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think it's a very, very bad scenario that's out there. Very scary.
Well, let's bring on our guest, a very, very great guy, Jason Pye, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for FreedomWorks, and he also has a lot of thoughts on this topic. Jason, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Medicare for all and everybody health care and, the government's going to pay for it and, it's a birthright and, you don't have to work for it and, who cares, if you came here illegally, everybody in the world should have American health care and all American workers should somehow have to pay for it. I mean, a pretty ridiculous proposition. But Jason, how do we pay for it?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, what she rolled out by my count is $19.7 trillion in tax hikes, and that's just for Medicare for all. I mean, that's on top of everything else she's proposed. I mean, she's proposed repeal of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. She's proposing a wealth tax, or increasing the payroll tax, expanding the estate tax, corporate profits tax, lobbying tax. Those are all the things she's proposed even before we get to Medicare for all, and then that's another $19.7 trillion. Which you got to wonder the economy cannot absorb that sort of shock without severe ramifications, and it will halt investment. It will reduce the incentive to work, which means a reduction in productivity over time. So we'll have fewer opportunities and less prosperity as a result of it, all for a probably more than doubling of the size and scope of the federal government. And you'll have quote-unquote free health care, not free health care. I mean, but the quality of that care will be reduced anyway. We've already seen what's happening over in the UK, where they have record-long waiting lines for even the most routine of surgeries. This is what awaits America if we go down this road that Senator Warren, and as well as Senator Sanders and others, want as well.
Well, yeah, you're exactly correct. You know what I find interesting with the Democrats, and they're talking about how are they going to pay for it, and you listen to their convoluted math. I'm sure we've all listened to that. Well, you take the total amount of people, divide it by 3, get to the hypotenuse of that, add this, put that to the pi squared, and you follow through, and they come up with a number. They say, well, that's what it's going to be. That's how we're going to cover it. But then when you throw in, well, that's only if everything works right. What does everything always work right in the government? So all of it is pie in the sky.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think it kind of feeds into, like, they're playing what it appears to what they're playing with the static numbers. Like you said, it's basic addition and subtraction, but the economy doesn't respond to changes in the tax code in the same way. Just because you anticipate you're going to bring in $1 trillion of additional revenue because of a change in the tax code doesn't mean you actually are going to receive $1 trillion, because the economy is dynamic. It responds to changes in the tax code, either negatively or positively, and the increase or decrease in revenues that come as a result of that are what follows. I mean, it's you cannot sit here and say, it's like you have soda taxes, for example, or D.C. is looking at doing a soda tax, and they expect to bring in a certain dollar figure of revenue. Well, you're surrounded by 2 states that do not have a soda tax, and Virginia and Maryland. So people are going to go just across the river to Virginia and get lower cost soda, or as they do
well, that's
now,
going to change real quick. Now that they got everything.
So you don't bring in, you don't bring in the amount of revenue that you anticipate. With the taxes that Elizabeth Warren talks about, it's a little bit different, obviously, but they're basing this all on static assumptions and not even taking into account the dynamic functions of the economy, which means that the revenues that they expect to receive are not going to be, those targets are not going to be hit.
So, Jason, also this week, talking about taxes, between Bill Gates and Elizabeth Warren, there's been this sort of back and forth about the Warren's the wealth tax. And Bill Gates, I mean, let's face it, let's be real, that these tech billionaires, from Northern California, from up in the Seattle area, are traditionally very progressive. Very much huge Democrat contributors.
I noticed that.
Massive amounts of money to the Democrat Party. But Bill Gates, and who's been a very generous guy. You look at some of the things that he's been doing. I mean, he's been giving away billions of dollars. He and his wife, he's sort
very
of
pro-education, trying to help that.
I mean,
good thing.
You got to admire the guy.
Sure.
You got to admire the guy. Now, he said, look, Elizabeth Warren's ideas on this will just stifle innovation in America. It's bad for our country. We shouldn't be doing this. I pay $10 billion in taxes. I'll pay $20 billion in taxes, but don't do this because you're going to hurt the country. You're going to stifle innovation. Talk to us about that.
No, I mean, Bill Gates is just basically saying what I just said, and he's just putting it in real dollar terms. He's like, yeah, I mean, look, you could increase my tax bill. I pay $25 billion in taxes. I could pay double that. But once I start paying $100 billion, is what do I have left over? I mean, and I even saw before I came on the air, Bernie Sanders tweeted something out about, if Bill Gates paid $100 billion in taxes, we could solve homelessness. Everybody in America could have safe drinking water. And he said, we shouldn't be living in a country where billionaires have it all and everybody else has so little. It's like, what country are you living in? Like, Bernie Sanders looks at the United States as some sort of third world cesspool, and apparently so does Elizabeth Warren, who, for all intents and purposes, is a socialist. She doesn't wear the label that Bernie Sanders does, but I can't see much of a difference between the two. But you cannot go in and tax someone like Bill Gates and consume mass amounts of his wealth, $100 billion or whatever the billion-dollar figure you want to use, and not expect ancillary effects to the economy. You cannot do that. That is not possible to do. There will be some measure of, especially if you're doing it on a larger scale, some measure of decrease in investment or decrease in innovation, as Bill Gates even said. Like, there will be ramifications for this. Ramifications.
Unintended. I mean, the unintended consequences of everything they do. Hey, Jason, we got to take a quick break. We're on with Jason Pye, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for FreedomWorks. Still much to talk about. You don't want to miss it. Stick with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we're together with Jason Pye, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for FreedomWorks. Jason, another piece that you that recently wrote, and I'll just read the headline here. Democrats play the role of Queen of Hearts. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. And obviously this has to do with the impeachment process that we're going on with right now. And though, they're going to bring it out in the open and, okay, it's going to be public and so on and so forth. But the rules that they've set up are just so inherently unfair. And due process is a right for American citizens. I mean, it's what's made our country so great. I mean, everybody gets treated fairly no matter what you are accused of. You still are treated fairly to defend yourself, except, I guess, for the President of the United States.
Well, look, let me clarify something right off the top of of this part of the discussion. The Constitution just gives the House the power of impeachment, and it doesn't spell out the process. It doesn't say anything about due process. The impeachment has always been a fundamentally political process anyway, and the founders, even the framers of the Constitution, even recognize that. But we do have precedent, and the precedent has always been that the president is afforded due process or procedural rights. And in the case of the Clinton impeachment back in 1998, and then the trial back in 1999, the House Judiciary Committee, before the authorizing resolution even went to the floor, had approved those procedural rights in consultation with the president's counsel before the before the impeachment authorization was even considered by the House. So, but Democrats are doing this in a way that is very peculiar, to say the least, as they do most things. It's that they've already decided that they're going to impeach him. They started the investigations, at the beginning of the Congress, and have just progressively gotten to this point where I think even at the end of July, Chairman Jerry Nadler was basically saying we're already in an impeachment investigation. They finally have acquiesced to some measure of structure or procedure, sort of, but not really, as it became clear that this was like a weak point for them. But everything they've done, even in the resolution, it was HRES 660, was passed by the House 2 weeks ago. It sort of gives the president, or it directs the Judiciary Committee to come up with procedural rights. But if you go back and look at the summary of the resolution, it basically insinuates that the Judiciary Committee can revoke those procedural rights at any time if the president's counsel objects to something or disputes something or doesn't hand over a document that they want or something like that. It's basically saying you have procedural rights. Kind of, but not really.
I think what you just said is very accurate. Kind of, but not really, because it all has to go through Adam Schiff. And they have to ask permission to Adam Schiff if something can be done. So Adam Schiff is still controlling this kangaroo court.
And it's tied to that the president and his people have to be cooperating in handing over everything that they ask for. So right there, they've set it up that they can deny it. I mean, it's right there. But, Jason, I want to ask you this. Follow up on Rich's point. I mean, this just is inherently unfair. But, I think it's coming down to three words, right? Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. Is there a quid pro quo? Does it matter if there is a quid pro quo? I mean, what you just said, and I've heard Rich say as well, is that, hey, this is a foregone conclusion. They're going to impeach the guy. But how important is the quid pro quo?
It depends on who you talk to, and I've talked to several members and as well as just observers who watch the process. Friends of mine who work in the conservative movement, and virtually everyone says, look, I don't think there was a quid. They say I don't think there was a quid pro quo, but even if there was, this is done in foreign policy all the time, and there is truth to that. Personally, that's an argument I have stayed away from because I don't know the details, and I don't know what's been said in deposition. I haven't had time to review the transcripts, for example, from the depositions inside the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. But I'd say the president has a tremendous amount of latitude in how he deals with foreign policy, and if there was a quid pro quo, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for that to happen.
I mean, if you, Jason, I'm sure if you recorded the conversations of American presidents talking to foreign heads of state, you would hear all kinds of stuff. But unfortunately, Jason, we're out of time. Jason Pye, Vice President, Legislative Affairs for FreedomWorks. Jason, thanks for being on the show. Hopefully you'll come back and join us again real soon.
My pleasure. Anytime you guys want.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I still have a lot more to discuss. Stick with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, I know you're dying to get into this conversation, quid pro quo. How important is that? I mean, does the president have the right to talk to foreign heads of state saying, we're about to give you $400 million. We want to make sure that there's procedures in place about corruption. And,
that's right.
There's been a lot of money.
And that's his job as the president.
Is to protect corruption. And, just by the way, the corruption is also in the United States. We would like you to kind of look into some of these things that happen in our country, in your country together. Is that a wrong thing to do? And how has other presidents addressed this in the past. Well, we will never know because, we will never have those transcripts. And what was it that President Obama said, and the mic was on? And
I'll have a lot more latitude after my next election.
After the election. Hey, right. They're talking about
what does that mean?
Some arms treaty issue. And, hey, just trust me. I can't tell the American people, I can't be honest with the American people.
The fix is in. I could say that. I'm very worried. I should whistleblow.
I can't be honest to the American people.
Get me a whistle. I want to whistleblow Obama. I'm very nervous. Until you just said that, I did not understand why I haven't slept well for the last few years. I just figured it out. Quid pro quo. First of all, I got to tell you, a lot of copies of Julius Caesar selling like mad right now. Everyone's studying up on quid pro quo. Just want you to be aware of that. You see, here's the deal. From one point of view, quid pro quo is important because that's what they started out saying, didn't they? But they started out saying a lot of things, Neil, going back to the Russian collusion and obstruction of justice. All those things fell aside, and everything they've been talking about has gone through this morphing. It's morphed from one thing to the next to the next. Well, that didn't work. Put it aside. Put it on the shelf. Well, this one will work. No, that doesn't work. Put it on the shelf. We'll try another one. So now they go, oh, my God, we have this whistleblower who coincidentally happened to work for, what's the guy's name? Clapper and Brennan and Biden when Hunter was over there doing his thing, even though he didn't know anything about it. He got a great job over there. It doesn't matter. It changes. It changes because the end is worth it. Anything you do, the means equate and equal the end. That's all they want to get to. So the quid pro quo, if you read the transcript, look, it really comes down to words, doesn't it? So if we have the words, I don't care what the interpretation is from anybody who, by the way, this week they announced, one of the folks who was whistleblowing, got their information from, the New York Times, which goes right back to the Russian collusion thing. One media validated the other media, which validated the other media. Neil, they're playing the same bloody game over and over again. So get back to your question. Does the quid pro quo count? Well, in some form, yes. But since it's not there, it doesn't make any difference because it's their interpretation of what happened. Because what you're going to see, I believe, when the transcripts get really out, not just what Schiff wants you to read, is that they're going to say, well, I heard, I thought, I'm concerned, I got worried. There's never going to be, I heard a quid pro. Because if you look at the words, and that's all that counts, in the transcript, it ain't there.
Right, and the president of Ukraine has said that he had felt no pressure and there was no quid pro quo. The president has said there was no quid pro quo. It was, just a normal act of government doing business.
They didn't even know that any funds were being held up for a few days just to make sure there was no corruption over there. They didn't even know it. So where was the quid pro quo? Where was the concern? And by the way, they're so concerned, well, this is a jeopardy to the United States security and Ukraine security. Well, let me think. We sell them missiles to protect themselves and weapons, and Obama gave them MyPillow. Gave them pillows and blankets. I mean, probably good ones, because MyPillow is probably, according to what I read, everywhere you go on cable right now, you have the guy from MyPillow. So Obama is sending them MyPillows, hundreds and thousands of MyPillows, so they can hit the enemy on the head. They can have the biggest pillow fight in the world. It's not going to save them, but they're going to get to the Guinness Book of World Records. So Obama sends them that. Oh, that's not a security risk. Oh, no, that can't be that after all. Why don't you send them the sheets that go with it? According, they come from Giza. The cotton, it's the best cotton in the world. The Russians will just, you know what they would do? They take the sheets and go home because they want them for their home. They can't get them. Jesus, God, I can't believe what I listened to. And people then were saying, is this a quid pro quo? No, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. It's only what Schiff wants to count, and Pelosi wants to count, and Nadler wants to count, and all these fantasy people on the left. That's it.
Well, Rich, thanks for informing me.
I just thought I'd say that.
But unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.